Before we get started with the usual content, let me remind you all once again to take 5 minutes to complete the survey that I kicked off a week or two back. I'll put the link in the description again. The purpose of this survey is to gather our collective favourite books. So I'm asking you to tell me your top 10 EVS science fiction books, starting with 1 and going through down to 10, and then I'll collate all of those and come back to you with a video running through the top 25 or something. At the moment, we have 78 responses, or at least we did when I looked earlier on, and I think I need probably at least 100. So if you haven't already done it, then have a think about it, complete the form, and I will get on with collating the results. And let's get on with the usual stuff. So what have I been reading this week? First book I read was Bloom by Wil McCarthy, and I'd started this just about this time last week. It's early in the 22nd century, and the Earth and several of the inner planets have been consumed, transformed by a fast-acting, self-replicating nanotech infestation, and believe me, that's not easy to say. The tattered remains of humanity now eke out a living in the asteroids and Jupiter's moons, and these are the descendants of the very few people that were able to get off the planet before it was munched by the nanotech. And even now there are still sporadic outbreaks or blooms even in the far reaches of the solar system. Part of the challenge is that our defences against the nanotech are also nanotech, and there is some evidence of this now being subverted by the Mycora, the baddie nanotechs of the piece. The narrator of Bloom is a guy called Strasheim. He's a journalist, part-time, and a cobbler. That's his profession. And he gets dragooned into going on a mission. The ship is called the Louis Pasteur. It's been custom built for this mission, and it's been camouflaged, nano-camouflaged indeed, to protect the crew from any blooms that they might find out in space. Their mission is to plant detectors on Earth and Mars to better understand what's going on, to understand the threat. There are many actors involved in this mission, including some fringe dwellers in the asteroids who are taking a very different approach to their society than the Jovian moons do. There's also the temples of transcendent evolution who believe that the Mycora, the nanotech, are divine and that humanity's destiny lies with it. Nothing is what it seems. The crew must figure out what their true purpose is, who they can trust, and even the true nature of the Mycora is in doubt. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that the threat posed by the nanotech blooms was gruesomely demonstrated on more than one occasion, and that was really great. And I really enjoyed what's effectively a car chase across the inner solar system and the discoveries that the team make along the way, along with some profound implications for humanity. It's my first Wil McCarthy book, and I enjoyed it pretty much. I recommend it if you haven't read it. Next, with not a little trepidation, I tackled The Crystal World by J.G. Ballard, and I listened to this on audiobook. I read Crash, the only Ballard until this one that I'd read, and it put me off reading him for many, many years. In The Crystal World, we're in a jungle somewhere in Francophone Africa, in Cameroon, I think, and our protagonist is a Dr. Saunders who runs a leprosy clinic in a university town somewhere. And he is travelling upriver to get closure with a lady that he had an affair with, the wife of his best friend, in fact, a couple of years back. And on arriving after a boat journey at a nearby town, he finds it in chaos. There are police everywhere, there are cordons, there are soldiers, and there are furtive market traders selling fancy goods from beneath the counter. And there's a strange glow on the horizon. It turns out that there's a spreading zone of crystallization, which is affecting the jungle, obviously, and the animals and the people within. And Saunders gets unwittingly involved in a feud between a couple of the other main characters. But overall, I found that The Crystal World is a tale of contrasts and of similarities, of prismatic reflections and transformations. The contrasts between the dark and light are a frequent motif. You've got the glowing crystals versus the dark heart of the jungle. You've got the white expats versus the locals, the black Africans. And then we have the white suit of Ventress and the black of the priest, who are both passengers on the same boat as Saunders. And then there's a resemblance between Louise, another passenger, and his ex-affair, Suzanne. I really enjoyed the descriptions of the transformation process and the crystal jungle and the animals within it. And Ballard did a fantastic job, I thought, of making it sound just beautiful. The characters in the story may be a bit bland and not a lot really happens of any note. Ballard, perhaps unsurprisingly, is more focused on the psychological impact on the expats, some of whom surrender to the crystal transformation. Some strive very hard to escape, and then some feel compelled to return. But after reading Crash a few years back and hating it, I'm mainly pleased that I didn't hate this. I quite enjoyed it. Next came The Boy on the Bridge by M.R. Carey, and this is a prequel, sort of, to The Girl with All the Gifts. It's certainly set in the same world, or rather the same end of the world. Beacon is a fortress encampment on the south coast of England, and it's the last known redoubt of humanity, at least in the UK, after the plague of the Hungries, the zombies of the piece. A mixed team of 12 are sent out in Rosie, a land leviathan. It's like a combination of heavily armoured tank and a large RV. She's like the 13th character, actually, in the book. And the team of 12 are on a 7-month mission north to retrieve samples left by an earlier mission. There are 6 scientists and 6 military, and it's kind of an ensemble cast, but the main characters, I suppose, are Rena, who's a female scientist, and Stephen, her autistic, we think, young assistant. In some respects, this story is basically an unusual road trip in cramped conditions. There's a tension between the military and the scientific crew, and there's an ambiguous chain of command just to help things along. The Hungries pose a threat, and when they're encountered, that's a problem. But this team has the experience and the training to handle it, especially the military guys. Stephen, Rena's assistant, is brave, and he's a genius, but those aspects of his personality are largely hidden by his crippling shyness. He basically only talks to Rena, and only then because they have a close affinity based on some shared history. The team on their mission find something that they weren't expecting, something surprising up north, which presents both new threats and new opportunities. I like the dynamic between Rena and Stephen, and between Colonel Carlyle and Lieutenant McQueen, and I really like that surprising discovery up north and the way that those interactions were described and handled in the book. And I like the last minute link to the girl with all the gifts on basically the final page. So if you like an end of the world tale and you're partial to a zombie, and whether or not you've read The Girl with All the Gifts, then I think that this is definitely up your alley and you should give it a read. Next, I read Hopeland by Ian MacDonald, and to be candid, I was unsure what to expect of this book. I did ask Ian when I spoke to him a few weeks back what his favourite of his books was, and Hopeland was the one that he came back to. So it's a pretty strong recommendation when the author says that it is his favourite book amongst the books that he's written over the last 40 years. So I did go into it somewhat optimistic on that basis, but really I had no idea what I was to expect. With talk of electromancers and archmages on the blurb, it reminded me a little bit of the magical realism of Clive Barker, perhaps, and maybe the scenes that were set in London particularly reminded me of the Rivers of London series by, I think it's Ben Aronovich. Anyway, the setup for Hopeland. Hopeland is not a nation or a cult, it's not a religion. Hopeland is instead a family of sorts. It's a found family, a chosen family, a voluntary family that you can join or leave as you see fit. It's growing, it's melding and morphing all the time. The early chapters of Hopeland are a race across London rooftops between Racer and Finn Hopeland, who are both racing to become the next electromancer, so-called, of London. Into all of this frenetic activity, Eamon Brighton stumbles out of a tube station at Oxford Circus and into a riot that happens to be happening at the same time, and then bumps into Racer mid-race, and romantic sparks fly, and he's smitten for good. Within 50 pages of starting the book, I was utterly hooked. I was hooked on the prose, on the premise, the characters, the off-kilter perspective of Hopeland. I love the parallel, or rather hidden in plain sight nature of the Hopeland's doings in London, where actual churches are repurposed into housings for huge Tesla coils, part of the defences against the demonic, apparently, the chief duties of the electromancers of London. I really love the early interactions between Racer and Eamon and those that go to develop over the course of the book. I loved Eamon's family too, the Brightborns, based in Ireland, who have their own interesting history to bring to the party. We spend quite a bit of time in Iceland, and then for a long section we end up in Polynesia, which was not what I was expecting, but I went with it, and MacDonald slowly weaves that whole thread back into the main story, and in quite, it turns out, dramatic fashion. I really loved this book. I love the sweep of it, the magic of it, the joy and the love in it, the peril and the fortitude in it. And there's more than a nod to climate change in Hopeland, both threats and opportunities, and it's full of human stories. It's really pretty hard to describe what this book is like or what it's about. It's a journey, both human and geographical. We're island hopping, travelling the liminal, the edges of the world. We're in Iceland, we're on atolls in the Pacific, we're in Hawaii, the Aleutian Islands, Greenland, and England, and of course Ireland. It's about family, it's about friends, it's about doing what's right, it's about love in its many varieties. And talking of love, I really love this book, everything about it. It's the first book in quite a while where I entirely lost myself in it. I almost missed my stop on the train on the way to work during the week as I was rushing to try to finish it. If you're ready for an unusual, compelling ride, I thoroughly recommend it, and I would certainly particularly recommend that you stick with it for the first 100, 150 pages until the story really gets going. Well, I think that's a pretty good reading, and I'm particularly happy to have finished Hopeland, not just because it was very good, but it was my last book that I had planned on my October TBR. And this time last week, I was a little bit concerned about being able to finish it in time. What have you been up to this week? What have you read that you might like to recommend to us? Do let us know in the comments. It's always good to get a good book recommendation. Channel stuff next then. Subs are at 3,535, which is up 40 on last week. A pretty good week. If you're one of those 40, or if you've stumbled drunkenly upon my channel for the first time today, then a huge welcome to you. I'm John, and I focus on collecting, reading, and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Tom Hunter, who accused me of being old. His point was that younger booktubers inevitably skew recent in terms of the books that they read and talk about on BookTube, and whereas us older farts range a bit more widely, perhaps. But I think we're all products of our formative years, so it's not surprising that the younger booktubers tend to focus on more recent books. But there is a lot of science fiction gold in them thar hills, and I'm enjoying the digging. Thank you to Tom and to anyone else that takes the time to leave a comment on my channel. I really appreciate it. It's one of my favourite aspects of running this channel, is chatting to people in the comments. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel this week. On Sunday, there was my TBR video for November. That involved the Bingo Balls of Fate and the Decision Dice of Destiny, and new for this month, the Ramekin of Rolling. All the alliterations. That video comprises quite a bit of me staring at my shelves, trying to decide which books I might like to read, and then having the Decision Dice of Destiny choose one for me. So if you find the prospect of somebody staring indecisively at their shelves, then that's the video for you. Surprisingly, a good number of people do enjoy watching it. There's no accounting for taste. And on Tuesday, there was the long-promised video looking at John Wyndham's post-war novels, and in the process of doing that, I share my thoughts, but I also rank them and declare my favourite of John Wyndham's post-war novels. So if you're interested in John Wyndham and you want to know what I think about those books, then that's definitely a video that you should watch. On the book buying front, it's been, let me just say, a pretty expensive week. On Sunday, I went to visit the infamous Dorset Bob. Cash changed hands and many books were purchased. I bought such a large selection of books at Bob's, so I think it's probably worth me doing a special edition book haul focused on just that, and that will include a special offer for viewers of this channel, and I'll tell you more about that at the time. Including the purchases at Bob's from Sunday, there are a huge 49 books on my to-be hauled pile, which is plenty enough for 2 haul videos. What have I watched this week on BookTube? A couple of the regulars. I watched Richard over at Vintage SF. It's his 1.5 year anniversary, and he had some reflections on life on his channel. I'm particularly interested in his thoughts, as he and I started our channels at almost exactly the same time, just a few days apart, in April of 2023 it must be. And then I watched Matt at Science Fiction Reads do a shelfie of his hardback collection, at least the ones that he can jam onto bookshelves. I think he had several more stashed in boxes nearby. It's always fun having a nose around other people's shelves. Talking of which, coming up on my channel over the next week or two, on Sunday there will be a wrap up for October's reading, and I'll repeat myself a little bit because I'll be covering the 4 books that we already spoke about today, but also the other books that I've read during October. I shall rank them mercilessly whilst giving you my thoughts about them, and at the end I will declare a book of the month. And on Tuesday, there will be a full library tour. I can tell you now, that's one that you'll want to get a cup of tea and some snacks ready for, perhaps an adult beverage. It's about 1.25 hours long, and I go through shelf by shelf my entire library. Longer range, I'm still working on that science fiction mysteries video. I have it written now, I just need to record it and edit it, etc, etc. I want to do a video looking at the culture novels. I've started thinking about what I want to say on those, but I haven't done anything more about it yet. There'll be that Dorset Bob special edition book haul, and then it's long past time I took a look at audience recommendations. I'll scour the comments for books that you have recommended to me and to others, and I'll do a video looking at 10 of those. Plus, of course, at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks, there will be the results of the inaugural survey of our collective favourite science fiction books. But in order for that to work, you need to fill out the damn survey. So please, again, if you haven't already done it, please do that. I'll leave a link, as I said, in the description to this video, and I'll put it in a pinned comment as well. So what will I be reading in the coming week? So I've made a start on November's reading, it being the 1st of November. I'm about halfway through Moving Target by Elizabeth Moon, which is the second book in the Vatters War sequence. And I'm enjoying it. It's fun, nothing too heavy, but it's a good read. And on audiobook, I've made a start on Empire in Black and Gold, which is the first of the Shadows of the Apt series by certain Mr. Adrian Tchaikovsky, and I think I'm right in saying this is his first published novel. It's pretty early days. I've only listened to about an hour and a half's worth of it, and there's about 25 hours in total. I will make a significant dent in it over the weekend, but I doubt that I'll finish this in time for next week's wrap up. We'll see. And then after I finish the Elizabeth Moon, I shall be moving on to Natural History by Justina Robson, and if I finish that during the week, then I'll see where the mood takes me from the books that I already have on my TBR pile. As usual, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and until next time, goodbye for now.